So, a Chinese designed and Chinese built Tesla subcompact? Maybe. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, good morning and welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt Shoemaker and this is Tech Forum. Today I want to talk about Tesla's announcement that they're looking to build a design studio in Shanghai and potentially have a Chinese designed, Chinese built subcompact car. In fact, there's even been a couple of design sketches that have been circulating around about this. The internet is abuzz with this car, and a number of YouTube channels have already done a sort of a discussion on it, and I wanted to weigh in on this. So my thoughts on it. First off, it would be easy to just scream and say, yes, excellent, an inexpensive Tesla that's small, maybe in the sub $30,000 range, you know, $28,000, $29,000 electric Tesla. Well, this, I wanted to give a view of this. I want to play devil's advocate on the other side. Now, let me start by saying I think it would be a great thing. Personally, my wife and I have been looking at short-range EVs. We already have one. We have a small smart electric drive we bought used from my daughter for $5,000. Very reasonably priced, 2014 car, great little car. We're also looking at potentially buying either a Fiat 500e or a Chevy Spark EV, or I don't know. There's a number of short-range EVs that you can buy inexpensively that are in the 80 or 90 mile range on a charge, and we're looking to do that because the smart electric drive that we have is for my 16-year-old son. So the other car that we buy would be for my wife to do her day-to-day grocery shopping, and she would still have her normal car for any further driving or whatever. Now, that being said, one has to ask, first off, what's the market for a small car like that, both domestically and worldwide? I think there's a much bigger market worldwide than there would be domestic, but there is still a market for small grocery getters here in the States. Then you have to ask yourself, well, how would they go about building and marketing a car that's $28,000, $29,000, which I believe is where they would need to be in order to market this car. In fact, possibly even less. If you look at the real tiny grocery getter market, like the tiny Mazdas and the Mazda 3 or the Chevy Spark and that, you're looking in the even high teens to low 20s. People are willing to pay a bit of a premium for the Tesla name. However, not a huge amount. I mean, when you're talking about a subcompact, people that are looking to buy a real basic form of transportation, they're not necessarily looking for something that's going to be in the high 20s with the Tesla name on it. They're going to be looking for basic transportation. So in that instance, it's hard to say what would happen. Now, I think there are a lot of people that would love to buy a Model 3, but $35,000 to $40,000 base price is out of their reach. So and maybe the Model 3 is a larger car than they might need. So I do believe there's a huge market for it, but there's a couple of concerns that I have, and I really haven't heard much shared about these concerns. Number one, the overall the risk exposure versus profit per sale. Now, I know Tesla is trying to accelerate the adoption of EVs. I get it, and how better to do that than to flood the world with inexpensive EVs. However, as a business owner and as an inventor, I understand from a microscopic standpoint what that macro picture means. And so let me throw this out at you. Just from a pure business model standpoint, it's better to market something that's, say, a $1,000 product and sell 10 of them per week than to market a $100 product and sell 100 of those per week. And here's why. When you sell even though the gross revenue, it's still $10,000 per week of revenue, with the larger, the more expensive item, selling fewer of them, typically you're going to have a higher profit margin per item, and you're going to have only 10 transactions to make that $10,000 gross revenues, not 100 transactions. And the reason that that's important is your risk exposure is more condensed. When you start to sell many more items at a thinner and thinner profit margin, even though your gross dollars are high, you have so many transactions that the odds of having an issue with those transactions goes way up. I've seen this with my appliance business. I used to be a low-cost discount servicer, and I was killing myself doing many service calls a day. Well, the problem is my recall rate, which is the number of times I have to go back out to take a second look at an appliance because there was an issue with the first repair or whatever. If I'm squeezing more work into the same amount of time, now all of a sudden I'm doing more work. I'm rushing my way through the work, so the quality of work was down, and I have more opportunities to maybe leave a footprint on someone's floor that they complain about, or if I've got a say a 5% recall rate, every 20 service calls I have to go back, now I'm going back more frequently for no charge than I was before. So I'm running ragged, I'm doing more work, and I'm having more problems, more recalls, and having to give away more free warranty work after the fact. So I learned to modestly increase my rates so that I'm just in the average, not the cheapest out there. And my profit margin went way up. When I manufacture things, when I was making electric bicycle drive systems, I found that it was better to be in the high end selling a few items than in the low end selling many items. So there's that facet to this. Now, I know that Tesla is marketing hundreds of thousands of cars already, but when you go from hundreds of thousands to many millions of cars, that becomes an issue. Distribution logistics and the number of service centers goes up astronomically high. So, and your service rates must be lower. Or you need to make cars that are so incredibly reliable they rarely need service. Well, okay, that's great, but now you have to charge more for those cars, which battles against your discount vehicle model. Now, another thing is supercharging. Now, I've only ever heard one other YouTuber talk much about this, and but his take on it was in the positive. Hey, you know, Tesla's going to sell a lot of these cars because you can supercharge them. And if they have a smaller battery, they're going to supercharge faster. Well, I take issue with that, and I disagree with it for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you have many more cars on the road, let's say you've got 10 times more cars on the road, now the superchargers are clogged. And clogging the superchargers is not a good thing. They're going to have to expand the supercharger network. And I've had people say to me, well, but if it's a little grocery getter, they're rarely going to be taking trips with it. Well, I don't know. People that buy little grocery getters oftentimes can't afford a second car that may be their only car. So for Tesla to market a subcompact car, they're going to have to give it a limited range. So let's call it, I don't know, just for sake of argument, 160-mile range, whatever. So it can compete with the newer Nissan Leaf or whatever. So let's call it a 160-mile range car. Now, when you travel with that car, it's not going to be a 160-mile range on the expressway. It's probably going to be more like 100 or 110 miles, which means you're going to have to stop every 80 miles to charge. So now what's going to happen, instead of stopping to charge at one supercharger, skipping 2 or 3 other superchargers to stop to charge, you're going to have to stop at every supercharger that you run across or every other supercharger. So you're going to be stopping more often. Now, the comment that was made by another reviewer talking about the fact that charging the car will go quicker with a smaller battery, not necessarily, and here's why. Internal resistance of a battery dictates how much amperage you can pull from it or dump into it. Tesla batteries are historically high internal resistance. They do that because you can pack more energy density into a smaller package, and the cells are less costly to manufacture. A lower C rating, which is C is times capacity, or how much current the battery can pull. So Tesla batteries typically are 5 or 6 C batteries. They only want to be charged at 1 C, maybe 2 C at the fastest, and that means a 1-hour charge, doubling that, so a half-hour charge at the fastest, but a maximum of a 1C rate would be normal to protect the pack. Now, that means that a 75 kilowatt hour pack like the Model 3 can be charged at 75 kilowatts or 150 at peak just for the meat of the charging curve, which is what they do. So if you take a car with a smaller battery, say half the size battery of the Model 3, call it a 35 or 38 kilowatt hour battery, that's all great, but you can't pump 150 kilowatts into that pack. You'll fry it. That's going to be a 4C charge rate. You can't do that. So you're going to have to slow the charge rate down in those cars, which means they're going to take just as long at each supercharger, and they're going to have to stop more often, which means a shorter range Tesla will actually gobble up more supercharger space than a longer range Tesla with a bigger battery. Now that is unless they put a higher C rating battery in the car, but that costs more. And there we are back to higher cost. So there are issues with doing this. Now, it doesn't mean I don't mean to say that if Tesla markets a subcompact car with a say 160 or so mile range for mid-20s $1,000 price range wouldn't sell. Oh my gosh, they would sell a ton of them. I'm just saying there are issues there, logistics issues with this, that I think a lot of people aren't looking at. They're looking at it from a consumer standpoint, going, oh, this is great, and I could buy a new Tesla for 25 grand. I pay cash for it, no problem. Or my payment would be so small, and what I save in gas, the car would be free. Sign me up. I don't care if I have to wait 5 years. Open up the reservations. I'll take it. I'll buy two. I mean, that's the way people are looking at it. But again, there are logistics issues. From a manufacturing standpoint, it's not as easy as people think. Many of the cars, like the cars that I mentioned before, the Fiat 500e or the Spark, Chevy Spark EV, those are compliance cars. The manufacturers are forced to make them for limited markets, and then they're brought out of those limited markets and sold nationwide or different parts of the world. And those cars are inexpensive. They have a very, very tiny battery. They're typically 90 miles of range or less, but they're really not a profit-making proposition. And they're typically not going to be fast charged. People aren't looking to travel with them. So now, what about Tesla marketing a short range car that doesn't use a supercharger network? Maybe it's just got a J1772 plug. You use normal chargers, you wouldn't be using the supercharger network and whatever. A car like that would sell, but you lose a big portion of what makes a Tesla a Tesla. Supercharger network, the tech, they could use this large screen or maybe shrink it down, maybe go from 15 inches to 11 or 13 inches or something for a smaller interior without hitting your knees in the corners or whatever. But they could have a single screen, but we've got what makes a Tesla to a large extent is the supercharger network, which again I've just been dealing with. Secondly, autopilot, and all the crazy tech that Teslas have. So adding all those cameras and all the autopilot hardware would make the car more expensive again. And I know economies of scale and all that could kick in, but we already have economies of scale. When you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of cars, there's not much economies of scale difference between 500,000 cars and selling 4 or 5 million. I think the economies of scale are already kicking in. So I think that the adding autopilot hardware would be cost prohibitive on a lower cost car, and using the supercharger network would just, those of us that have paid a higher premium for our cars would all of a sudden object. There's already Model S and Model X owners that will thumb their noses at Model 3 owners at superchargers, and I think it's because they view it from the standpoint of all these Model 3s are clogging the superchargers, and they kind of are. Stop at a supercharger. If there's a 10-stall supercharger with 8 cars there, 6 or 7 are Model 3s, 1 or 2 are an S or an X. The Model 3s are already starting to clog the supercharger network. My gosh, throw a $25,000 or $28,000 subcompact car into that mix that many, many people could buy and that has to stop more frequently. Holy cow. I mean, we'd have lines at every supercharger. It would be nuts. So those are my thoughts on it. I'm not against it. I'm all for it. In fact, if Tesla announced it, I would instantly order one. I wouldn't even care what it looked like. I'll take it. I would instantly take one. But recognizing the fact that I already own another Tesla, a longer range car that I would use for travel, knowing there would be limitations to that car. And also recognizing that maybe they would have to charge a lot to supercharge it to minimize how much supercharging use, but you know, that also kills the inexpensive side of owning that car. But I would be one of the first to order one if they marketed an inexpensive car. I'm just saying there are reasons to see why Tesla is hesitant to do that, at least here in the States. Maybe it would work in China, but to do it worldwide, there's issues there. So anyway, those are my thoughts. You know, agree with me, disagree with me. I'm sure there's going to be people yelling at me in the comment section saying I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe so, but these are things that I haven't heard anybody else mention yet, or maybe only touch on but not elaborate on to any extent. So anyway, let me know what you guys think, and you know, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Click the notification bell. I've got several new videos coming out soon that are quite a bit different than what I've been doing in the past. I think you guys will get a kick out of it. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. And as always, stay charged.